Hi, this is Caleb Owens with the Insurance Experience. Today I have Kevin Townsend. Hi, Kevin. How are you today?
Good, Caleb. How are you?
I'm really good, really good. I'm really looking forward to this meeting and hopefully I can learn something new. I feel like every episode, everything I do, I've learned something new. It still surprises me, but yeah, every time I learn something new from somebody.
I'm glad to be part of your show here. Glad to jump in and happy to share anything I can.
Yeah, definitely. You've got some well-rounded experience, so you should really bring some insight as into, what does a claims manager do and how you got to your role. So if you don't mind, give me a walk through your background from
Sure,
where you
sure.
came from.
I'd be happy to. So back in the mid 2000s, I was in the construction industry and we built some residential homes. And we also did commercial work. We did fabrication and erection of structural steel and did a lot of jobs, anything from Dunkin' Donuts, gas stations, banks. Probably the largest job we did was an Embassy Suites hotel, Arby's. We did a little bit of everything. But of course, 2007, 2008, a lot of things happened and we got caught up in actually very interesting, not for us, but we got caught up in a job we were doing in a part of Florida where the general contractor had a friend at the bank that forged some inspection documents
Wow.
and allowed the contractor to collect $1 million and walk away. So he disappeared and left. We actually were out of that million. We're the largest. We were out $500,000, and we weren't a huge company, and $500,000 hurt. Matter of fact,
Yeah.
we had to just to pay for the materials. We had to foreclose on the property so that unfortunately, I hate to say it that way, but we did, and the owners actually paid us. I said, look, all we want is the materials money. We're not here to. We know you got shafted too, and so we got our money to pay for that, but ended up having to shut the business down. Make a long story short, and of course, insurance carriers are always looking for people that are skilled in construction. So I started out actually doing field underwriting, and then got into
Oh,
claims. And then basically about 20, not basically 2016, I got into claims management, started working with my first carrier and started in inside operations after being out in the field for a long time and just went from there. And actually that was at that time I was with security first. I worked for Tower Hill for a while and I'm at Frontline now for a little over 2 years and really enjoy it and enjoy the role because it's to me, you, unfortunately, you're dealing with people when they're at their worst situation.
right. Yeah.
And you have to, as we all know, right, as everybody says, someone's home is their biggest investment for the most part. So whether it's damage to one room or damage to the whole house, it's a big deal to that individual, that family. So you're there to help them. Unfortunately, not every, I know in the claims business, we take a lot of heat. Not every claim is paid, but not every claim qualifies for payment. But we start out looking to make payment and we certainly do make payment on a lot of claims. It's obviously very rewarding when you can help somebody, and that's the job, right? You're trying to get them back whole before the loss happened, and that's what we do. It keeps us busy, it keeps us on our toes, but it's very enjoyable and it is rewarding because you do get to help people get back to where they were.
That's good. That's good. Wow. Okay. Yeah. I'm just trying to package all that together. So you had quite an experience, it sounds like, through no fault of your own, through that construction experience. And then you found yourself moving towards the insurance. I think a lot of people are like that. Like they don't necessarily intend to do where they end up, but through life courses, it just takes you that way.
It's what they a lot of people consider it the accidental occupation, right?
Yeah.
Because although in my household, my wife happens to be an agent and has been in the business actually probably since 1986.
Wow.
And then we had one son, and he's a commercial underwriter. Um,
Really? Wow. So you got a
so
family business.
yeah, it's family. But of the three of us, we can say he's the only one that planned to do it. But
Okay.
so it is the accidental occupation. But I think when people get into it, they find it is rewarding. And whether you're selling a policy or creating a policy or marketing a policy or the actuaries that figure out the numbers or you're working claims, I think the there's a rewarding feature to all of it for everybody that's in the industry. So I think it can be fun. It's really fun to be the camaraderie of people when you're helping the people that are working for you, and then you're helping the people that have the claims. And so it's a good rewarding experience all around.
Wow. Okay. So as a claims manager, you have people underneath you that
Correct.
actually handle the claim, and so you're their manager. You're overseeing everything. I would imagine you don't get involved in like individual claims as much, or just like a whole team kind of thing.
It depends. We do get involved in a with the individual involved in the claim, depending on the situation.
Okay.
Sometimes I don't have a problem talking to anybody. Obviously, if someone's not happy with the payment, oh, I think it should be more. I'm happy to have that conversation and explain to them maybe it is more, maybe it should be more, but please help us because it's certainly it's an estimate. We can make a mistake. Be the first one to raise my hand and say it can happen, but try to work for them to make them understand and help them to understand what we can do to find out if it is correct or incorrect. You have that, or sometimes you might have an individual that might call you, want to talk to you because the claim's been denied and they're either A, didn't understand the reason given, or B, are not happy with the reason given. What I like to do, no matter what happens in the outcome of a claim, I want that insured to know that we tried our best, that we worked
Okay.
for them. Now, again, if in the end, ultimately it's denied, they may not be happy with me, but I want them to feel like we did everything we could because that's all I can do. That's all the company can do is put forth and say,
Oh,
we've done this investigation, we've done this, we've done that. I'm sorry that it didn't go the way you wanted to. We did what we can do. And people appreciate that. Doesn't mean they're happy, but they do
oh,
appreciate that. And many of them will tell me, still not happy, but I can tell that you did what you could do. And that's really the face I want to present. And that's really the face any carrier wants to present. Sometimes that message doesn't get out there, but the bottom line is we want the individuals to realize that when we worked their claim, we did everything we could for them.
yeah. That's got to be a really tough subject matter, like what you're talking about. Whenever someone files a claim, and it ends up like no payment or non-payment or something to that effect, that's got to be really hard for you as well, and for your teammates to really deliver that message. I can only imagine how that would go down, especially if they've got a large loss. Does that happen often, or can you give me a breakdown of that?
It happens percentage wise. I'm not sure the numbers that denied versus paid.
Sure,
But it does happen.
sure.
And it does happen. I don't know. Large losses generally are pretty straightforward. So maybe that's not the most
Oh,
common,
okay,
but it does happen. And at that point, you just have to try to explain your best to people. That's why I'll never turn down an insured wanting to talk to me
hmm,
because they feel like if I everybody feels like they get to the next level of the ladder that something's going to change. And I always say to somebody, I'll review it and I'll review everything, but I will not promise you a change because I can't. And I'm not going to say that we sometimes will go back and we'll look at something and go, yeah, actually that was missed and we should have done this instead of that. And
sure.
we'll make a change. But but people do truly appreciate you going back through and looking at it and then
Trying.
discussing it more in depth with them because they feel like, again, you were there for them. And in the end, not everybody's going to get paid, but we're going to work hard to make sure that we've done everything we can to determine whether they should or should not receive payment for their claim.
I see. Okay, so I'm presuming that most of the claims that are like that are probably going to be smaller ones. I can imagine like hail damage or roof damage or things like that would make more sense to me.
Yeah, you get claims, for example, Florida, we don't get generally don't get a lot of large hail.
Okay.
But recently we've had a few storms where this was large hail. This was inch and a half, 2-inch hail, which of
Wow.
course that's not Texas hail or Oklahoma hail, but it's still large hail for
That'll
Florida.
do some damage.
And it will do some damage. But then what happens is you'll get insured might think they have damage because Joe or Sally that they know 2 miles over in town had damage. So maybe therefore I had damage. To me, I'd be happy to find no damage. But sometimes maybe they're prodded by a roofer or someone else that says, "Oh, you got damage." Maybe the bottom line is the roof was older and there really wasn't any damage.
Right.
But by the same token, if they really sometimes at that point, if they're not comfortable with the decision, we'll utilize an engineer to say, "Hey, you know what? I'm out of the equation. Let's get
Try
that
to get a
engineer
third
involved
party in
and
there.
get
Right?
a third party in there and get their opinion
Yeah.
and go from there." And
Hmm.
sometimes that third party will come back and say, "You know what, Kevin, you were wrong. I'm okay with that. I don't
Hmm.
have a problem being wrong. I don't have an ego. It's
Right.
if I'm wrong, if I'm right, but I'm not going to argue about it because the bottom line is we're here to do the right thing."
That's good. That's really good. That's good to hear. Frontline, are they only based in Florida? Is that correct?
We're based in Florida, but
Florida.
we actually operate in Florida, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina.
Okay, so like the southeast
Basically
portion of the U.S.
Southeast, yep.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so we're doing when we do commercial and residential properties.
Okay.
Commercial is only in a couple of states, Florida and South Carolina, and then the residential is in all those states.
Got it. Got it. Okay. I hear a lot about Florida these days with so many different things going on. Obviously, the big hurricane last year, or Ida, that came through, did a lot of damage. And then there's also the state's law that just changed recently. I believe it was January this year. There was a new Florida state law that just changed. So there's a lot going on in Florida with insurance.
A lot going on. Obviously, the hurricanes that happened in 2022 aren't affected by those policy changes that took effect. It was signed in January, but actually took effect the middle of March 15th. So there are some new changes to the law. In some ways, they help us. In some ways, they help everybody. But I think basically they were designed to create a stabilization in the market because there's a lot of things up in the air. It was no secret. A lot of carriers have gone out of business in Florida, which is Citizens, which is the state-run operation to really jump in size again. They had at one point they were over 1 million policies. They got that down to about 400,000 policies, and I think they're now back up to about 800,000 policies, give or
Oh,
take.
wow.
Which is obviously not the goal. When you have someone that's called the insurer of last resort, you really
Right.
don't want to do that. But when companies go out of business, you really don't have a lot of choice. Now there have been a few carriers that have come into play in Florida now that are going to start to take some offloading from Citizens. So that should ease that burden there a little bit, but that is going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight, but we've had 2 or 3 new ones jump in, which shows that people are feeling good about the market long term, that there'll be some changes in this marketplace, which is coming. Unfortunately, it didn't come soon enough for those 6 companies, but companies will come out of that, new companies will come in and things will happen.
Sure, sure. It's always evolving, things like that. I always heard as well recently, I've talked to quite a few different people and different companies about this, like the reinsurance market as well. What's going on there in Florida.
Well, reinsurance is everybody that is here was able to get it and able to get it done by June, but it was tougher. And of course, it was a little higher cost wise for everybody. But and then the state has a reinsurance backing plan as well for carriers that might want to engage in that if needed. So
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
there's a
Huh.
couple of options for them. Obviously, there's the basic ones that are out there that sell reinsurance on a regular basis. And then, like I said, the state created a plan as well, just because of the way the market was, the way the marketplace was. They had to do something and they jumped in and did. So that was very helpful.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So this is really crazy with Florida. I'm pick on mainland Florida because there's just so many different things going on. It seems like relative to other states, there you don't really hear as much happening there, but heard a lot of different things, a lot of premiums going up, and it's probably a really complex issue. It's not just one party's fault. It's not just one person or anything like
No,
that. There's a lot of factors going into that. Some of it's climate change, but some of
there's a
it's
lot of not to be interrupted, but there's a lot of things that
good.
go on, right? You
Sure.
have it for various reasons, which are some of them are now changed, but it was a very litigious market. They say I don't know the exact numbers, but they say we're basically 8% of the policy count in the US, but we're 76% of the litigation.
I've heard that. I've heard that.
And that's eye-opening. And
That's crazy.
if that doesn't say something to someone, I don't know what else will. But that is the truth. Litigation. I mean, we operate in the 5 states I just mentioned. They're all southern states, and we don't have the litigation issues in those other states.
Wow.
They just simply don't exist. Take that for what it's worth, but to me, it
Huh.
means something because we certainly deny claims in the other states as well, and other carriers too. We're not the only ones, but the litigation was much, much higher here. And because there was a fee statute which allowed us to be responsible for the insured's fees if they win the case.
So all their legal costs as well, correct?
All their legal costs, that's now changed by the new statute.
So you do think that will improve the situation in Florida over the course of so many years?
It'll take time because again, you
Right.
still had the backlog of claims that were filed before that date. And then of
Mhm.
course, a lot of the attorneys, and not just property, and this was, auto glass, a lot of suits were filed up until the last date they could do it. So,
I see.
but that was their right to do. You can't take that away. But I think a year and a half down the road, you'll see much better landscape in this market.
Hmm. Wow. Okay. So that should really put Florida more on par with the other states, like reducing it significantly.
Yes, most definitely, most definitely.
Okay. Yeah. Then, and I've heard as well about Citizens, and I'm sure a lot of other carriers as well. And it's not necessarily the carrier's fault. It's just a matter of you're adapting to your situation. And then this is not just Florida, but the premiums are going up significantly across the board, all over the place. And so people are getting squeezed just because you're having to factor in so many different things. So many that's the reinsurance market because those costs are going up. Some of that's just the cost of rebuilding homes because that's all gone up significantly.
It has.
There's a lot of different factors into it. This is going to happen regardless. You're going to have to see insurance premiums going up along with the cost of everything else. So that's definitely impacting families, I'm sure.
Just if you think about it, if you just go back to pre-COVID, right? So you have a rate and for that policy, and let's just say it's $1,400, and let's
Okay.
say it was a $400,000 house. After those issues, right, and you had the sharp rise in lumber,
That's right.
the sharp rise in
Yep.
roofing materials, rises in labor costs. You add all that up. If that house is burned to the ground and it was $400,000 when you wrote the policy, it is no longer $400,000 to replace it. Do the actuaries build in a little bit of a fudge factor? Probably, but it's not going to be that much because you had all those materials, those major materials. I didn't even count electric or plumbing, but everything went up.
Yeah,
So then,
exactly.
your $400,000 house that you had to replace is now 475.
Or
So,
more
or
in
more,
some cases.
yeah, or
Yeah.
more. So the bottom line is all that works as a tornado, so to speak, and comes
Yep.
together, and you say all of a sudden, wait a minute, but we are responsible for it. We have the responsibility to pay for that, and we do that. At some point, rates have to go up. So,
Exactly.
and you have to be
Yeah.
able to account for it because again, if you're that policyholder and it happens to you again in 2 years, you want us to be there. So that's how that. So I don't think. And again, you're playing with people. Things go up, whether it's food, electric,
Yeah. We've
gas,
seen all that go up, right?
all that's gone up. So then
Yep.
people feel like this is going up too, and it's not fair. But bottom line is, all the carriers have to prepare themselves to be ready to be able to meet the demands that come up in the near future. And again, we are in Florida, we are in a peninsula, we do get storms. We had that 10-year span where we had nothing, but really since then, you've had the Matthew, the Irma, the Michael, the Ian, the Cole. The storms have come. Not obviously Irma and Michael and Ian were the worst, but it's devastating. And then you have things pop up, tornadoes just come out of the blue, and again, hail like we've never had hail here in years. So people have to be prepared for it and
Yeah.
carry.
Yeah,
So
exactly. That's along the coast as well. Like I'm sure like the whole state of Florida is really vulnerable as opposed to let's say Alabama or one of those inland states like that where there's a good majority of their population lives further inland. You're not going to see as often, let's say, a hurricane go straight up into one of those major cities where you have as devastating as you would in Florida. Florida, it walked over the state, didn't it? Just goes.
like Nicole, for instance, which was the second storm that happened in November of 2022, it was not as intense wind wise. But if you looked, because I went over there, if you went over to the Daytona Beach and south of there and a little bit north of there and look at the erosion factor, it just shocking. People lost, they might have had 75 feet of land out behind their home and it's gone.
Oh,
Or people they might have had pools back there. That's gone.
behind their
Hotels
house. That's
behind their
that's what you're
house.
saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And then you had condominiums complexes and hotels that had to shut down because they lost their seawall, and from the seawall gave way, so they lost part of that property, became unstable. None of those collapsed like the tragedy we had down there in South Florida, but
Right.
still, it was a major event that created a lot of issues because there was a lot of
Oh,
erosion from that storm, and I think people don't understand sometimes just the power simply of water alone.
right.
It just does such devastating damage, and that's really what happened from Nicole versus Ian was a large wind event. Of course, it came in on the West Coast. So the state had that double whammy within a couple months. Of course, we've had
Yeah.
worse. Back in '05, '06, we had the 4 that came in that same year, but it's still a lot of damage because of this, the way we're situated.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's what I mean, is in the cost going up, but there's a lot of factors into it all, and the reinsurance market. I didn't know about Florida, so the state as well, the state itself is stepped into the reinsurance market, acted like a backstop, if I understand that correctly.
Yeah, they've created a backstop if needed. So that that's a new thing, just been in place a couple of years, but they did do that. And I think that was just based upon seeing what was going on and seeing where reinsurance was headed. But I don't know that I'm not aware of anybody having to use it yet, but at least
Hmm.
it's there, which should make the citizens and the policyholders in Florida feel better as well because that's there. They know that their carrier's got a place to go if something happens.
Because you absolutely need that. You need to have reinsurance market is there for a reason, and so that's really important to have. So especially as a backstop as well, it's kind of like Citizens is for your
Correct.
average homeowner. They have to have the insurer of last resort there. So that's really important. Where do you see? Go ahead. What you going to say?
No, I
You
was
had
just gonna
something.
say, and other states do this. People don't.
Yeah, they do.
I grew up in Massachusetts, and a friend of mine since we were 8 years old lives on Cape Cod, and he's in what they call the Mass Fair Plan, very similar to his Citizens, just because
Okay.
no one else wants to reach out there and get those people on the Cape because they're exposed as well from a
I didn't
lot
know
of
that.
different weather events. Of course, Louisiana calls their Citizens, so they're in existence as well. We're not the only one that does it, but we may be the
Texas has
most. Texas has their wind
Texas
plan.
wind and flood, something like that.
Yeah, they have
Yeah.
that plan as well. We might be the most famous one just because it's Florida and what happens, but yes. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, you were gonna say something else.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I didn't know about Massachusetts had that.
Yeah, it's
So
called the FAIR Plan. Yeah,
okay, okay. So I didn't know that. I knew like a lot of the states along the Gulf and the eastern coast where they're getting hit a lot, they have something like an insurer of last resort. But I didn't know about Massachusetts. That's way up there. But like you're saying, that if you live in a vulnerable area where you can't get any other insurer there, you're going to have to do something.
exactly. Yep.
Wow. Yeah, so we're seeing that all over, like with California as well. California is
Yes,
having a lot of problems. Some of those insurers are stepping out of that market entirely. And it's not just a matter, strictly speaking, of the risk of fire and hurricane. It's also, and I didn't know this myself, that it's the cost to rebuild. So if you're going in there and looking at the cost to rebuild in some states versus others, it's significantly higher. And so they're measuring all that and saying it's better to step out of it. We'd rather not even insure in this state.
even nationwide, they just announced that they're gonna pull out of commercial auto and commercial trucking and public
Yeah.
auto
Wow.
operations.
I didn't know
So,
that.
which yeah, and I think it's like a I know that because my son is in that sector. He's in
Oh,
commercial
okay. Makes
trucking,
sense.
but he said that it's like a $300 million book or more that they're just pulling out of. Again, it's about managing risk, and I guess they've decided that their risk is more than they want in that area. So you're not just seeing it in property, you're seeing it in
Right.
other sectors of the industry as well. But obviously, it's most famous in property because obviously everybody's aware and everybody's affected.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Is whenever people are affected like they are with homeowners insurance, you're going to see much more of an outcry as opposed to commercial auto and different things like that, or in commercial trucking, it just goes unnoticed because those are companies that are dealing with that and they're not going to see the same public outcry from that.
Correct. Correct.
Huh. Where do you see everything going towards now? So like with the different the adjusting, do you guys still use a lot of field adjusters? Are you guys using technology? How does
We
Frontline?
do still use a lot of field adjusters. We
Okay.
have started to look at some technology things, some virtual type inspections, some issues with drones, but not really in a real serious manner. I think we're still wanting the boots on the ground, the body on the roof to get a better accurate inspection. This thing, we're not opposed to looking at things as they come up because I think that technology is great, right? It's going to go a long way and it's going to improve things. I don't know so much about AI doing adjusting a claim. I think that might be going a little
Sure.
bit too far, but
Right.
I do think there are some technology issues that are going to be helpful in the future. There's a especially especially you look forward to like small simple losses, right? That you can say,
Right.
okay, Mr. and Mrs. Insured, here's an app, put it on your phone, take a look, take some photos, exactly what's going on, give me some overviews, go from there. Even some apps that will actually dimension the room.
That's
And
right.
I think that's going to be a good play in the future, but I don't see it I see it quite a while before replacing the actual field adjuster. I just don't think that's feasible. Maybe it's easier in auto, maybe not, but it's not ready for property on full scale, in my opinion, yet.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that same thing is that, at least from what I've heard, is that you can do smaller things inside a house with these apps and different things like that. So anytime you can reduce your costs, reduce your overhead, that makes your company more efficient. So that's a big factor with using this technology.
Yeah, and you try to implement it as much as you can, but again, there's some times that there's only so much you can do. And again, plus I think people they want to be served too, right? They feel like, hey,
Sure.
I'm paying you $1,400 a year, $2,400 a year, whatever the fee is for the policy, they want to feel served. And again, as I said earlier, it's their biggest investment. So I think that having that person in their home, discussing it with them in more detail, I still think is the preferred way to go. And I think it'll be the way to go for a while. But as the technology improves, you get more people that are younger that are in the home space. They may feel more and more comfortable with it.
Sure.
Just a few years ago, texting the customer was not a big deal. Although we don't do it yet, we're going to have a platform soon where we can do it. But a lot of carriers do, where are you okay with texting? The insured says they're okay with texting, and you text them some information again. But I think that's different because they know they're getting an update, so they feel like I'm getting an update. But I still think the person in the home is still vital.
That's interesting. Okay. Yeah, that's different from what I've heard from other companies. And it depends on the company. I think it's depending on which company you're talking to, they have a different take on that matter. But and you're right, especially I was talking to another gentleman earlier in the week and he was telling me about his mom that she was having to deal with this and he actually stepped in there to help out. And he was saying that with some of this technology that they've rolled out, she's really not going to be able to use this stuff because she is older
Correct.
and
Yep.
you're going to have a problem with people that are older to get them into that technology. And unfortunately what I've seen are already, and this is now, is you're caught in this middle ground. If you are older and you're not necessarily so technology inclined, you don't necessarily understand it all and you haven't grown up with it, where you get put into a squeeze. We had an older gentleman that we were helping out with temporary housing, and he wanted to sign everything in paper. And we can't do that. We got him taken care of. We got him an actual travel trailer, but we had a lot more difficulties because he wanted things in paper. And now so many companies, I was unaware of how many have moved on from doing things in paper in the older ways. So it makes it very difficult to even go back and do that. Now, all of a sudden, if you want to go back and say, hey, let's do it the way we always used to do it, it's no, you can't even do that. And it's crazy. And that was in a rural part of North Carolina. And this is not a major city. And you couldn't even find anyone around to do anything in paper. They just said no, that's not even an option. So we had to find other ways around it.
Yep. No, it's that's true, and that's the thing you do encounter. And you listen when someone's buying a service from you, which insurance is a service. They don't want to hear we can't do it. We can't do it that way. There's limitations. But the bottom
Sure.
line is they want. Look, I'm paying you for this, so work with me here. And you're like, you're thinking to yourself, well, yeah, I have to find a way to get that done. I
Yep.
understand that they're not they're technologically challenged, excuse me, just because that's the way they are. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
We're trying to get it to work, and that it takes a while, but by the same token, you've got to serve your customer, which
yeah,
obviously you did in that situation, and
of course.
that's what, you know, you
The same is for us as well. It's one way or another, we got to get this taken care of. And it was just unusual because I didn't expect it to be that difficult. I've grown up with paper and I was like, of course we can get you a paper copy. No, we couldn't.
we
It was
can't
just
do it.
really difficult. And you're like, that's crazy. That's so crazy. But I think it's just the speed at which so many companies have adopted e-signature and things like that. And
Right.
it's actually cheaper for them to do that now, better tracking, better different things like that. So that it's almost made the older style of doing things obsolete. It's still available. You can still get places that are doing it, but it's certainly more difficult and therefore more expensive. But it was just an eye opener for me. I was just stunned by that. I was like, wow, that's crazy. So I was going to ask you, how do you guys have any problem with your temporary housing? Has that been an issue to put people up and anything like that?
It's been a little bit difficult at times. You get some of these events and things do happen where you kind of run out of options. It We've worked with several different players in the marketplace, and for the most part, it we've been successful, but it still gets tough at times. Or options, or most insureds, which you can't blame them. They want to be as close to their location as
Of
possible.
course. Yep.
And sometimes that's just difficult depending on their area. And certainly you feel bad, but when something happens in the winter in Florida
Yeah.
and it's in an area that's popular in the winter,
All right.
it's real hard to find anything, right? Because
Yeah.
you've got maybe sometimes of the year you've got all these Airbnb locations or all kinds of rentals, but then when it's season, A, the price has jumped up, and B, which it is what it is when the price, you got to get them there. But B, the options become so limited. And yeah, I know you live right within a mile, but guess what? There's nothing within a mile, or whatever the
Right.
distance is, just because the options disappear because that time of the year is so popular here.
Yeah. And that can be a problem, especially kind of like what you're saying, like the value of their home being $400,000. And now when you go back to rebuild it, the costs have gone up to $475,000. And same thing that we're seeing with ALE is that if they had 60 or $100,000 in ALE, that was a lot of money back 10 years ago. You could afford to live for a year or 18 months in temporary housing easily. And now all of a sudden, it's just like you're saying, the costs have gone up so much that all of a sudden that'll get you 4 months or 6 or 8 months, depending on the exact time. Like you're saying, seasonal price fluctuations massively increase your costs, and so then they end up having to compromise, which is okay. We can put you in this place for 6 months, 8 months, and then after that, your ALE is done. So that's made it a lot harder in some states more than others. Obviously, Florida would definitely be one of those states where you see a large influx of tourists coming down, and that drives up costs.
Yeah, it makes it tougher. It definitely does. And obviously, because of the COVID time, there was a time period where you didn't have that. But then once we got through that, then people were wanting to travel again and be back. And of course, the biggest spurt happened at the time with Ian and Nicole. It was definitely harder and harder to find people housing.
Yeah, it's just one more thing. It's like you're saying, you got the lumber costs, you've got all the other construction costs have gone up, and then you've got just one more element that's even another thing that's gone up in costs as well. So that's one more difficulty for you guys to have to handle. So a lot of different complexities with everything going on right now. It seems like this is a tough industry to be in, but you seem to handle it quite well. You seem to do really good.
Like I said, and I obviously you've seen my LinkedIn stuff, and
Yeah,
I
I like
just
that.
feel it's just best to be positive. It's best to put that out there that there's always it's like I saw ran into somebody last night, and when I was telling them that it always have a good day, and they said he's younger, probably a college kid, and he said, "What's the secret?" I said, "Listen, there's always somebody's got it better than you, and there's always somebody that has it worse than you.
Very true.
But the bottom line is you can control yourself and stay positive, stay focused, and spread that positive message out there. And I think that's really the most important thing. and then help each other. It's about helping each other.
Yeah.
And whether you're, not to be political, but whether you're Republican or Democrat or Independent, you can
Right.
help you can help each other. You can come together and help each other. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the way. It doesn't matter who you are, what you are, where you came from. We can all help each other, and I think
I agree.
that's the key to making it happen in the future. So
Okay. Definitely. You should run for office. I think you got it. I think you can make it
I
happen.
appreciate it.
Like, yeah, we need someone like you. We need someone positive like you. That's really good to hear. But I 100% agree with you. I think I've traveled quite a bit, and I've seen, if I ever had the idea in my head that I grew up poor in the US, I have seen other countries. I know what real poor is. I
Well,
saw that and I was like, we were not poor. We
when I
were not.
before I got into construction, I was in the electronics business. So I did a lot of traveling all around the world and a lot of time in Mexico and other countries. And the poorest of the poor in the US have it better
Oh, yeah.
than semi-poor in Mexico and other countries. That's not saying it's easy for them. That's just saying it's a reality check that
Oh,
this is the greatest country and we have our poorest of the poor are better than most people elsewhere. And that people have to understand that. That's why whether you like it or not, people flock here because it is the land of opportunity. It is a better place. So you got to realize that we're not poor compared to other places.
yeah.
And the other thing is we have the ability to get ahead where in other places they just, whether it's Mexico or India or
Yeah.
pick a place, they just don't have those opportunities. That's why another reason to stay positive is because things can happen here that can't happen anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, that's very true. Once you see these things, you're like, you can't watch it off. You're just like, wow. And what's really interesting as well, I've seen some really people that are very poor and they're the happiest and also the most giving. It's like I spent some time in Colombia in South America and I worked with some guys down there that were Colombian. And these guys are just so nice. And he didn't have anything. He didn't have anything. And he would give me a shirt and all kinds of things. I'm like, no, stop doing that. You need this. I don't need this. Thank you. You really need this stuff. And I really don't. I appreciate it. But it's really eye-opening. And I definitely agree with you is that there's a lot of people that have it much worse than you. Even on your worst day, there's a mass majority of people in the world that have it much, much worse
Correct.
than us on our worst day.
Yep, you are correct.
That definitely is eye-opening. But yeah, Kevin, I really appreciate having you, and I really appreciate your insight. You definitely opened my eyes to different things that I didn't see. I once again have to stand that you taught me a few things that I didn't even understand myself, and I really like your outlook on life. I definitely need to adopt more of what you have. Your thinking on, how to view this is your last day of June.
I appreciate it, Caleb, and I thank you for having me on. I really do, and glad to have connected with you and really appreciate the opportunity to share with you today.
Excellent. All right. Thank you. I'll try to have you on when you're CEO.
There you go.
Okay.
You never know what'll happen in life.
That's
always,
right.
always look to the future and
All right.
keep it
Have a
positive.
good one, Kevin.
All right.
Hi, this is Caleb Owens with Premier Insurance Housing. Do you need help with ALE or temporary housing for your policyholders or clients? If so, we would love to help out. We offer a wide range of services, and we offer our services nationwide. We offer mobile homes and fifth wheels to single-family homes and apartments. To request our services, just click the link in the description or give us a call, 405-604-0786. Thank you.